Testing 1 2 3. Testing 1 2 3. Can anyone hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, Curtis, I heard you. This is Sam from Toronto.
Hi, Sam. How are you doing?
I'm good, buddy. I'm good. I'm good. Very good.
We're going to try and do this on the back deck. We're in a top floor of a hotel.
Can everyone see? In the back, that's Vancouver.
Now we're going to have to use your audio or my audio, one or the other. Okay, hi. Now, either you... Oh, 1 2 3. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. You're clear.
Okay, great. Is it too loud, or do we need to go back inside?
No, you're fine. You're fine. You're fine.
All right, great. Turn this up a little bit here, at least on the hearing side. Tampani's here. Hello, Tampani. Hello, Melinda. Hello, Sam.
Hello.
Melinda's here early. Hi, Melinda. You're from...
Yes, I'm here in Toronto.
You're here in Toronto. It's been too long, my friend.
Yeah, hello. Hi, Kay.
Hi, Mel.
You can just use mine. You don't need the headsets. You can just, we'll just both use mine. Yeah.
You're so bossy.
I'm bossy. All right. So we've got a chat window opening up here. Good to have you, Raj. Or I mute mine, one or the other.
Thank you, Dr. Bong.
Hi, Raj. Lena's here.
Yes.
Oh.
Hi, Dr. Hi, Dr. Chang.
Ah, that's you, Mena. That's your nickname. Okay, I see. All right. Mena's here. Mustafa. Hi, Mustafa. Good to have you with us. All right. We're 5 minutes away from start time. So I will try and give you a view out the back. I don't know. It's a little bit not so easy to see. It's a gloomy day, but you can't see it. But the Pacific Ocean is down that way. It's a beautiful view, but it really doesn't show up all that well on this camera, unfortunately. You're stuck looking at me. Cuz might be a better view. That is better, but it's still a gloomy day. But her computer is a Macintosh, so mine is just a PC. Yeah. So,
Just a piece.
yeah, we're going to advertise Apple products here today.
Yeah, right.
So give us just 3 to 4 more minutes. We will get started here. Again, Mihun is here from Austin, from UT Austin. Good to have you with us. Lena is here. Lena, are you from the Middle East, or where are you from? You can let us know in the chat window if you would like. That would be fine. And Tampani's here from Thailand, and Sam is here from Fiji, and of course Mel is here from many places. She's traveling the world the last couple of weeks. She's been, I think she's met Putin in Moscow. She's she's starting her own new country, I think, just calling it Mel. Okay, so Melinda, how many places have you been to in the past month?
I can't count. I've lost count already. Hopefully, I'll be resting for a few days, and then I'm off again to Taiwan, to Kaohsiung.
Okay.
Yeah. But meanwhile, I'm here in Toronto, just 3 hours away from you guys.
Not far away.
Yeah,
You know what I think we're going to do? I think I'm going to go inside and leave you out here unless you would like to go inside. Would you like to go inside? Okay. Okay, because then we can both unmute our microphones. Okay, because as you can see, we're just sitting next to each other here. We're not far from each other. But I'm gonna go. I have a club room on the 30th floor here, so I'm gonna go inside and let Ka take over the. I'll do Okay, so she'll have to unmute her microphone, I think. But hopefully we can get this to work properly. In Vancouver, just a few minutes ago, or ago, there's a conference going on here in Vancouver. And you have a bigger conference there in Toronto. While I'm organizing some notes, Melinda, would you like to tell us what's happening in Toronto?
Well, we were informed earlier today that there are about more than 1,000 registered participants in the World Conference. And today we had this roundtable discussion of the presidents of open universities. So there are about 10 presidents of open universities, and we discussed some concerns, issues facing open universities. There was also discussion of what will be the future of open universities, especially now that we're talking of open education practices, and that even residential universities are into open education. So we are now discussing what will be the edge or the value added if the programs will be offered by the open universities. So that is kind of a discussion, and really looking into the future of open universities, especially now that everyone is into open education. Yeah.
It's good to have this perspective today because openness is really exploding in all shapes and forms, whether it's open educational resources, open courseware, open source software, open universities, open minds.
Yeah, open world.
Open world, the world is open.
Yeah.
So, you know, this is I think a critical time in that the bandwidth is increasing around the world. And the contents and the evaluations of the contents, thanks to Sanjaya, who's with us here, are starting to be better understood what quality indexes are.
Yeah.
And engagement and the tools that lead to that engagement are expanding as well. It's kind of a triple convergence, if you will, that's happening that is enabling more people to feel confident when they take open contents and open courseware and open courseware, that it's high enough quality and that people will respect it, right?
You remember your keynote speech last year in the conference in Seoul?
You were there.
I was there, and you talk about the Industrial Revolution 4.0. You remember that?
Right. Oh, sure. I hope.
Well, of course, there's a lot of discussion going on now about this and how open universities should respond. And with this industrial revolution, and it seems that we would like to say that open universities are in the better position to respond to the demands of Industrial Revolution 4.0. So
that's a good way to put it, right? In that, really it's the open universities that have had the first wedge in this movement.
Exactly.
It's like 20 years ago, writing as thinking was a movement. And people adopted that writing as thinking movement, maybe 25 years ago. But the first wedge of reform in higher education, now there's all this active learning, flipping the classroom, but really the first inroads was writing as thinking and the process model of writing. In effect, what you've done in open universities have had a similar impact to the writing as thinking movement, if you look at it that way. We now understand a lot about the learner that we wouldn't understand otherwise with open universities and their needs, their goals, the objectives that they have. So Tampani's with us here from Thailand, who could probably, clarify and expand on what I'm saying. We got Saraini here, we got Sanjaya here, we've got some world, and Sam to do this. We got some world experts here And Tel is here, who I didn't know if Tel would even be able to join us here in Brazil. They've had Brazil has not been impacted as much as the rest of the Caribbean to the north. We've got someone from the Caribbean who's supposed to be joining us who I haven't heard back from because Antigua's been hit really hard. So we've got 4 people. I should probably introduce folks and then let Ka take over. Ka and I have a book together called Empowering Online Learning, which came out not quite a decade ago, about my R2D2 model. And so Ka and I have been working in this area of online learning for a fair bit of time. And we thought it might be good today to have people come in this pre-conference to the pre-conference for a virtual chat. She was supposed to be back in Ann Arbor, Michigan, but she decided to fly here and join us live. So that's why she's here, face to face. So Zaraini Wati Abbas has been an old friend and was instrumental in the first symposium that we've done like this back in 2008 in Las Vegas. And her work on that symposium led to a special book that we did called A Special Passage Through E-Learning in Asia, which Zaraini may remember and Melinda may remember and others may remember. We did another one back in 2013 on MOOCs and open education, and this one is more specific to MOOCs and open education in the developing world. So Zaraini is one of our guests, and she's had several jobs in the past couple of years. Presently, she's president of AIDA, Association for Instructional Design Advancement in Penang, Malaysia, a lovely town where you can get wonderful suits made very, very inexpensively. We have a second guest, Tel Emil, from the UNESCO Chair of Open Education, University of Campinas in Brazil. I'm sorry, Tel, if I'm pronouncing anything incorrectly, but I will be in Brazil next month, so you can help me out. Dr. Tom Reeves and I are flying down. Your old advisor and I are flying together down to Brazil, and we'll tell you more about that later, at the end of November. And Sam Nadu is here with us from Fiji. He's now in Toronto for the conference. He's the Pro Vice Chancellor of Flexible Learning. Everyone needs to be flexible today. Flexible Learning, Director of the Center for Flexible Learning in the University of the South Pacific. And finally, Zornam Apadou from American University of Antigua is, I'm going to guess, is probably not here because of all the catastrophes that have hit that part of the world. But we have 3 of the 4, and we also have 4 more guests coming in an hour. Melinda Bandalaria, Etiano Odala, Tempany Tamatar, and Jingli Jiang from China, Thailand, Kenya, and the Philippines. Since the 2 of you are here, you can feel free to join in, and we'll have 5 people as part of this first conversation. Hopefully those 2, Melinda and Tempany, can stay for the second part, and anyone can stay for the whole thing if you'd like. It's great to have all of you here virtually and joining us. I see we have 19 people joining us here. I see Raj is here from Bloomington, Indiana, and others. Susie is here from Houston, an IU grad, Susie Grosnet. So if anyone, before we get started, and I see we got Jornam is here. So would you like to unmute? Hi.
Thank you. Hi. I made it.
Great. It's really good to have you. How is the weather? How is the rebuilding and all these? How are you doing?
We're doing okay. Antigua wasn't as badly hit as our sister island, Barbuda. So here in Antigua, we're doing quite okay. So we're
How far away are you from each other?
We're actually only 30 miles away from Barbuda.
30 miles makes that much difference?
Apparently in this storm, it really did. We were really, really lucky. So we feel very, very fortunate.
How long have you lived there?
I've just been here since January, so it was my first hurricane season, and it was a doozy.
And so you got your PhD from the University of Georgia?
Yes, that is correct.
Recently?
No, back in 2005.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Well, congratulations on getting a position down there. Maybe you can tell us more about that. And I will promise to send you some Halloween chocolate down there and so forth. Just give me an address. So, Ka, would you like to take over? Are you with us, Ka?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm just enjoying the view so much, but All right, welcome everyone. Since we are all here in this virtual session, I just, to start with a couple of questions and later write some questions.
We're losing some of that. We're losing some of that.
Side and maybe the
Yeah.
audio is a bit better. Okay.
But you're gonna have to bring a chair in. No, we'll have to share. Oh, let's see.
All right. Okay, since we're all here.
Oh, that's not gonna work. You might have to mute yours and come over here.
Okay.
A second. Now we can try this. Okay,
We can actually close that. Let me just stop here.
there we go. Yeah, that forward.
All right, our panelists are all very experienced with the MOOCs and other open educational resources and projects and initiatives. But it seems like, most of the active MOOC takers have been from the more developed countries, regions, and areas. And I wanted to open it up to our panelists. Okay, how do our learners in the less developed countries and regions and areas may be empowered from MOOCs or other open educational initiatives based on your experiences?
Did you all catch that question? We'll post it into the chat window there. Hang on a second. How about our friend in the Antigua? Would you like to be the first one to take a crack at it?
Sure, I'll start us off. So I think, although I've only been in Antigua a short time, what I do know about the educational system here is that there's not a lot of opportunity for attending institutes of higher education. So there's only one kind of 2-year, the equivalent of what we call a 2-year college in the US on the island. So most individuals, if they want to pursue higher education, must leave the island and go to another country. And to do that is quite costly, obviously. And so the level of educational opportunities on Antigua are very few and far between. So I think MOOCs offer a great opportunity for the people to have access to educational opportunities that are just literally not available to them locally. So for example, my mechanic, actually, he was a banker for many years, and he became a self-taught mechanic by using online resources to pursue understanding how to fix cars and all that sort of thing. So the internet and the opportunity to use things like MOOCs to advance his education is a really powerful thing, I think.
Which is a very skill-based kind of way in which to use open education, which is very common, actually. People acquiring skills to learn how to speak a new language, or learn how to fix something, learn how to design, learn accounting skills. Fairly typical. Anyone else like to jump in on this question?
Yeah, sure. I can speak a bit from our experience here in Brazil and in Latin America as well. I think that we share some of the similarities with other countries that have this approach to MOOCs that are very focused on individuals with not only of a specific race or a specific gender, but in the sense or higher education achievement. But specifically, we're talking about people that have access to the internet as a first criteria, and good quality access. And second, and I think this is something we'll talk about later, is having access to resources that are mostly in languages that are not native to the countries they're in. So because the offering of courses and materials in MOOCs are generally in English, or a greater variety is offered in English, we have a class of people in countries that are in, say, least developed nations that are generally richer and have more access to education that will allow them to take these courses. So one of the things that we've been discussing quite a lot is how do you, instead of focusing on just translating and adapting resources, which is of course a very useful thing, is to how do you empower the production of courses and materials in least developed nations for the situations that they're in, low bandwidth, intermittent connectivity, and things of this kind. And a lot of times, particularly in the case of MOOCs, as in massive courses, we assume a specific type of public that's very Anglo centered, and that's a challenge for us.
How have things changed in Brazil over the past decade, in remote parts of Brazil?
In terms of education access, you mean?
Yeah, and open educational access and bandwidth.
Our system is very centralized and fomented by the federal government, and so a lot of the initiatives have to be are public. Faculty schools of education are generally private, and they offer local education. So the capillarity of the system has been, a lot of it has been face-to-face. A lot of it has been opening up universities in remote regions that happen quite quickly. And recently, with some new regulation in distance education, it's been very easy, or it's become much easier to open centers for distance education in remote parts of the country. And what has happened is Brazilian legislation requires you to have a physical support place. You can't just offer a course in another city but not have something there, a building, a person to help locally. And it's partially as a way to try to avoid having people offer horrible courses in any part of the country wherever they see fit without having support for students. So this has generated a market for very low quality but abundant courses in Brazil. And our scenarios for MOOCs are very in the sense of even commercial MOOCs. They're not. We don't have a great number of providers. It's not an ecosystem has developed quite strongly as in other countries. So this is a very initial stage for us here.
The reason I ask is I brought a professor in from Brazil, Dr. Lucio Teles, who's an old friend, working in more of a remote part of Brazil, but it was pretty seamless bringing him into my class last spring. And so I was curious if the bandwidth actually has improved there, but you kind of answered that question. Etiano Adala is with us from Kenya. She's in the next hour. She's here a little early like Tempany is and others, and Mel is. So that's great to have people here joining us early. Feel free to jump in on this question. Would anyone else like to address this one? Sanjay is here as well.
Yeah, can I say something, Kurt?
Sure. Yeah. Hi, Zaraini.
All right. Yes, hi, Kurt, and everybody else. All right. Good morning and or good evening. I'd like to share my story about Malaysia. Malaysia is a very small country. We have about 32 million in terms of population. Interestingly, 40+% are in higher education institutions. And despite being a small country, we have about 400 plus, maybe 500 plus now, colleges, private and public, to cater to the 40+% in the university. I think if people have read the chapter that I wrote in your book, right now we have, the Ministry of Education has requested that every lecturer in every public university produce a MOOC. But of course, the MOOC is a course that they are teaching. primarily for their students, and if it was a common course for every university student in Malaysia, that would also be a MOOC, and they would decide which university would create that. However, I think almost all courses are in the local language. MOOCs in general, the ones which are in English, are taken, but not as part and parcel of the curriculum that would be automatically credited. So that's where Malaysia is. Malaysia is creating its own set of MOOCs.
You might want to briefly tell people your evolution of your career in the past 5 years, what you've been doing.
Past 5 years. I moved from an open distance learning institution. It's called the Open University Malaysia. I left it about 5 years ago and went to Jakarta to help start a private university. And I was there for about 3 years, then came back to Malaysia, had a sabbatical, and I will be joining another open university in Malaysia, in Penang in particular, next month. 2 weeks' time, I think. Yep.
And your PhD is from where?
From Northern Illinois University. Years and years and years ago, 1985. Got my doctorate in instructional technology. And since then, I have actually been fortunate to be able to stay in the field, to start work in the area, pushing for computer literacy at that time, and then computer-assisted instruction, and then, of course, internet-based learning, and on and on and on. So I've been part of the evolution of the field, and fortunate to have been able to make some influence in the country.
Yeah, the Open U of Malaysia grew very fast when she started there back in the early 2000s, I think, right?
Correct.
So it's grew by 10,000 students a year, or some huge number. We have a question coming in for you here from Hannah from University of Illinois. She says, in Malaysia, what systems do you use for MOOCs?
For the public universities, they have been requested to use Open Learning. Was it Open Learning or Open Learn? Open Learning, I think, the platform from Australia.
Yep. Okay. We have more comments on the initial question, or should we move on to the second one here?
We kind of already touched on the second one. Challenges that our learners in developing countries and regions. And we have heard our panelists mention about the language being, prominently in English. And as Rainy just mentioned that, in their initiative in Malaysia, when they were trying to create MOOCs, one thing that's very specifically stated is that it needs to be in local language. Any other, challenges that you're facing in your initiatives there, and maybe solutions and how you try to address those?
In Malaysia? Well, of course, like everywhere else, lecturers they need to be trained. So not every lecturer is jumping on the bandwagon. A lot of lecturers are stressed from the request by the ministry to have one of the courses in the form of a MOOC. But I think open learning seems to be template driven, so maybe that helps. And open learning has also established an office in Kuala Lumpur, having a set of instructional designers to help course developers when needed. But then I must admit the MOOC that are available are not really MOOCs, in the sense that not everyone in the whole world can join because of the language. So basically it's a limited MOOC. Most of the people taking it would be Malaysian students in the higher education institutions.
Sam, we haven't heard from you from Fiji. You want to give us your sense of any of these issues coming up?
Well, I mean, there's a lot going on, so I was kind of listening, But if I can go back to the first question a little bit, Kurt, I think the question itself needs questioning in terms of what it's asking. The question was, how can learners in developing countries? The point that I wanted to make was that the MOOCs in developing countries are not a raging phenomenon as such, especially in the Pacific that I'm aware of. There are one or two MOOCs around the place, and they are, targeted. But there are other ways of providing education and offering education to the various communities. I mean, online education is one way of doing it, and traditionally there was, of course, other forms of distance education as well. So there were other ways in which education was becoming accessible to the communities that were not able to access education. MOOCs is another way, but MOOCs comes with a bit of baggage as well, because MOOCs are supposed to be large, number one, and therefore it creates a lots of issues around management and organization. And secondly, it needs to be open and free. And that raises issues around sustainability and the costs of it. So organizations are still wrestling with that issue in terms of, if we are going to use MOOCs as a way of providing education to communities and societies that have not been able to, then how are we going to sustain it, and how are we going to manage it? Especially if you come with a history of offering education in similar ways before, such as with printed distance education materials or even online education. So, MOOCs is a kind of a third wave, if you understand what I'm saying, in terms of making education available to communities in the developing countries, and it raises the issues about, so what does MOOCs bring? Why is it better than online education, regular online education that we're familiar with, or as I said, the first one with printed forms of distance education or blended learning, for example. So what's the fuss about MOOCs? Why are we asking those questions? So I was just illuminating there while questions were going on.
So what about open education, the other side of that question, MOOCs and open education? What about the open education side of things? You want to address that side?
Well, absolutely. And open education is the root of it all. I mean, MOOCs fits into that framework. MOOCs is part of open education. Open education is not new. Various parts of the world, including, largely the developing world, both in places like the Pacific and India and Africa, open education is not new to these regions. There are large open universities have been in the business of open education even before the Americans found out about open education. So open education is not new. Sure, you're right. There are manifestations of open education such as open source, open architecture, which are new, but open learning in terms of education being accessible and freely available in terms of time, pace, and pace have been around. UNISA, IGNU, and all these big universities have enrolled millions and millions of students for years, for decades, for a long time, and in Malaysia and in the Pacific. So, for example, the University of the South Pacific was in the business of distance education, which was the most flexible form of education, an open form of education ever since the 1960s, But then now comes along MOOCs, and we are raving on and on about MOOCs. Sure, bandwidth is improving throughout the world, and it is going to continue to improve. So the question we need to ask is the sustainability of MOOCs, and how it's going to address the issues of the business model of it. And I think that is going to be the challenge. The educational challenges are not that great. We know that because we've been in the business of distance education and online education for a very long time, and a lot of those techniques are relevant still in the MOOC arena. But the sustainability of MOOCs, as we understand them now, is the challenge that presidents and senior administrators in universities are grappling with. You know,
I know a decade ago when I worked at my World is Open book, I interviewed someone in Fiji, and they were talking a lot about mobile learning for rural farmers and other things. Is that an area that's being consistently pursued today, or not?
Yes. That certainly is part of the picture, because that fits into non-formal education, and that has to be there into the larger scheme of things, because formal education is not going to be able to access or reach many communities or all the communities that need to be reached, because MOOCs, formal education, is going to reach only a certain group of people. But there'll be a lot of people who will not be able to access education through mobile learning and other kinds of ways of reaching those people who are not part of the formal education sector. So yes, that is certainly part of the scheme.
Okay, Kyle wanted to jump in here. You want to?
No, I loved when Scott mentioned about the issues and concerns about sustainability of MOOCs or other open educational resources and projects. And I wanted to turn that to our panelists. Anyone has something to offer, to that? Do you want to share some thoughts about that?
Their respective locale, what's going on there? We've got many questions on the chat window, as you can see, and more than we can probably get to in this. But I can read a couple of them. One is from Susie to everyone. I heard mention of challenges of language and internet access. In what ways have you seen accessibility for visual and hearing disabilities, etc., addressed in your work with MOOCs and open education or other distance education formats? Anyone want to hit on that? Tampany? We don't hear you, Tampany. Unfortunately, I can't hear you.
Hello, everyone.
Yep, we got you.
So, yeah, can you hear me?
Yep.
I'm sorry, I just have a cold today, so I try to do the best. Actually, that you mentioned about the language and culture, that how MOOC can support for the old language, and especially for the English language. In the Thai case, for right now, we set up the Thai MOOC for all the Thai people, not only for the Thai people, but for all the university. Firstly, we start from the university student, and we expand for all Thai people, so that we think that if we is some problem in the same that Solani mentioned, we also start Thai MOOC. First, we start for the local language, especially most of our language in Thai, for our course in Thai. And we think that if we start for the MOOC for the Thai people, and then we can enhance for all any language, especially in English language. We think that if we start for MOOC courses, the people can learn, can participate, and then they can enhance their language. Actually, we also start for the collaborative project with Japan MOOC and Korea MOOC, so that we gonna start for English language for 3 countries. In the first start of the Thai MOOC to enhance to another language. That is just a case. Sorry for my voice.
Hear from you. Anyone else want to jump in on that question? Mel, you have a comment? You're muted.
Yes, yeah. Can you hear me? Yes.
Yep.
Yeah. Good evening, everyone. With regard to the issue on language, actually, MOOCs being offered mostly in English is not really a problem in the Philippines, since the medium of instruction in our country is English. So it is it does not alienate us if the MOOCs are mainly in English, but in cases wherein, depending on the learning goals, considering the learning goals, for instance, if we need to translate the course in the local dialect, in the local language, which is Filipino or Tagalog, then we do just like that. I mean, translate the courses, translate the content in the local dialect, if that would mean facilitating the learning or achievement of the learning goals. So from English to Tagalog or to Filipino or even to any local dialect, then we are open to doing that if that is warranted by a specific course. I noted a question here from Susie, I guess, which says, how do we address disabilities like visual and hearing disabilities in our work in MOOCs? In our MOOCs, we tried to address or provide this universal access to our courses. So we try as much as possible to offer the content of our MOOCs in different formats. So like, for instance, we have the video materials, we have the text, and we have the podcast. And the text, you can enlarge so that it can easily be read by those having difficulties reading smaller font. Or if they want to listen to the lesson, then they can opt to do it using podcast of the lesson. So we integrate this feature into our MOOCs. We call that the multiple paths to learning. So the language and the universal access to the courses, something that we basically address, but we want to address it more in terms of the universal accessibility. We are doing research on that now, and we are hoping that we could make our MOOCs more accessible to those who are physically challenged.
Okay. You want to go on to another question? Other comments? We have several other questions on the sidebar here, as you can see. And you've been answering each other's questions on the chat window. I see Sanjay has been jumping in, trying to facilitate. Thank you, Sanjay, for doing so. Much appreciated. Is there an issue that's been coming? I see several being raised here. Is there anything that anyone wants to have the whole panel address? If not, maybe we'll go to your next question, Ka.
Yeah, I think we heard some from some of our panelists already, but if you have national projects and initiatives that you haven't mentioned, please share with us.
Okay, so national projects in your respective countries, in any of the 8 places we have interviewed, or in Malaysia, we have 8 different places represented. Is there a project that any of you would like to jump in and describe and get us excited about? No one's jumping in. I'm sure there are many. Tiano, you sent me a report today. You want to tell us a bit about it?
Hello.
Hi, Tiano.
Hi, everyone. Hi.
It's 2:30 in the morning in Kenya, or 3 o'clock in Nairobi.
Yeah, it's about 3:37 right now. I just wasn't sure whether our panel was on or how the format was. So I was kind of waiting, but So I'm going to turn off my video just because I'm getting a poorer signal with the video.
You're very clear. You're very clear.
You're very clear. You can leave it on. You seem very fine.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I was with the African Virtual University up until recently. So one of the initiatives of the AVU.
Oh no! What happened? No, don't tell us. Tiziana's a former student of ours, so I can make fun of her a little bit.
Yes, I was at Indiana University up until 2010, so it's nice to be able to connect again.
Good to see you.
Yeah, good to see you too. So yes, the AVU had a project for teacher education that used open education resources. And so they developed a set of open text, so modules, they're calling them modules, that were to be used in the teacher training program. And the way the AVU works is it works through governments of other countries and institutions, like the public institutions. And so the teacher education program was to be implemented. And this was done in 2005. And it was to be implemented in 10 countries across 12 different institutions. And one of the aspects of the initiative was to develop open education resources, which was to be used in this program. And so they brought together faculty from the different participating institutions, and they worked with them as subject matter experts, and they brought in distance learning experts and instructional designers, and they helped them come up with, provided a template for them to design and develop these and author these open education resources. And then these were then released with a Creative Commons license, so they're available on the AVU website, and they're accessible to anybody. So one of the things I was interested in the study I was doing was looking at if these open education resources, or the having access or availability to these resources, led to open education practices at the different institutions that were involved. Like, what was the impact so many years down the road after the OERs were launched and were being used at these institutions? And probably one of the key findings was that some of the faculty that I spoke with found that because the OERs were not really well integrated at the level of the institution, and they were talking about the OER were not necessarily aligned with some of their curriculum. And so you find that it was only being used more at an individual level by faculty who maybe felt more comfortable using the OERs, but it was not really well integrated at the institutional level. So the use of the OERs tended to be more supplementary. These OERs were in math and science. So the focus had been on math and science, mainly chemistry, biology, physics, and what was the other one? Chemistry, biology, math, and physics, yeah. And then there was a set that was ICT integration of teaching, the ICT integration of teaching these subjects. So this was also released as a certificate program, which could be offered as a short certificate program. Now, the certificate program was a lot more integrated within the institutions and for the teacher training and the student teachers. So this one was a very successful project compared to the ones for the degree program. So I'm talking about the degree program that was not well integrated within the institutions. And so this was being used more depending on individual faculties, whether they were involved in the creation, because as I mentioned, some of them were actually involved in the creation of these OERs. And so those who tended to be involved in the creation of OERs had developed some skills in terms of being able to use and being able to repurpose these OERs. And so they tended to be able to use the OERs much more effectively than some of the faculty who were not necessarily involved in the creation. One of the interesting things that we found out was when it came to the aspect of repurposing, when the OERs were being developed, please let me know if I'm talking too fast, sometimes I forget. When the OERs were being developed, there was a template that was provided to the authors, and they were being asked to make sure, because they were developing these OERs for students that were based in Africa, and so they were told to be able to make sure that, you know, that how they developed the modules were going to be accessible to African students. And one of the things I found in the template was they were asked to use, one of the faculty we talked to use storytelling, you know, in the development and repurposing of the OER. So if you had them looking for resources that were developed, a lot of the resources maybe that they were using were developed, you know, maybe in the US, in the UK, and so on, like Merlot would be a source for them and other places like that. But how do they repurpose this? And so one of the faculty talked about this aspect of storytelling, which he found to be very powerful. So he gave an example of, for instance, when you want to teach permutations in math, and then you have to talk about how do you, if you have potato vines, so this is trying to draw from the African culture, if you have potato vines and you have a leopard and a goat and you have to cross the river, you know, so what order would you do this? And so he said this made it much more accessible to the students because they were familiar with this story to teach permutations. So that was an interesting example of how to repurpose what the modules and how to teach what would have been a much more complex concept that the students were not familiar with. So that was one example of repurposing that I kind of wanted to share. But I can stop right there and probably answer questions or talk a little bit more, you know.
What you could do is give us a link to the report, because you sent me a link earlier and everyone could grab that then. It's brand new.
Okay. Yeah, I can do that.
My friend, the journalist.
Yeah, yeah. The report was more on the state of open education resources in Kenya. So it was just a survey of the different institutions and what kind of initiatives they were doing in terms of OER. Commonwealth of Learning is one of them, and there were some other initiatives by SAIDI, an organization based in South Africa, and so on. So I can, yes, I'll just put the link in the chat and then you can look at it.
Sanjaya, you're part of the Commonwealth of Learning. You want to comment on that?
Say that again?
Sanjaya is part of the Commonwealth of Learning. Sanjaya, do you know about this report? Do you want to comment on that?
Yes, I think it's the report that is published by the IITE. If it is that, then I have gone through that, and thanks for taking note of some of the good work that my colleagues here at Commonwealth of Learning are doing. Kurt, I was trying to jump in before to make a comment on, importantly, about equity issues. Some of the things that is the language issues, the cultural issues that are being talked about, and the challenges that is being faced for people with disabilities are largely related to one aspect, and that's most of the MOOCs are not openly available, meaning that they are not openly licensed. Since these are not openly licensed, they are not really making meaning for people in the developing world. They cannot repurpose, reuse, and do anything out of that. So it's an issue of equity in terms of the MOOCs that are being offered to people in the developing world. Otherwise, what is happening that these developing countries are themselves offering their own MOOCs program. Like India has a massive program on offering MOOCs, which is called SWAYAM. And around 2,000 courses are being developed and offered currently. Same with Malaysia example. An interesting thing to note in both Malaysia and India example was that they have developed credit transfer facilities so that students in conventional universities can take courses from MOOCs and get receive credits for that. So I think it's an equity issue that is leading governments to take national projects on open education. But unfortunately, both India and Malaysia's MOOCs are not really open. Some of them are, but not all.
Yeah, I interviewed a couple of people from Nigeria who had taken more than 100 MOOCs in a worry that they would no longer be free. One gentleman took over 700 and passed 300 with certificates. The crazy man, and at one point got all his technology stolen at gunpoint, and his neighbors shared their computers with him so he could continue all these MOOCs. People were worried that these open MOOCs would no longer be open. I guess what you're saying is that a lot of MOOCs already are not open. So the word massive open online classes is a misnomer. Many of these are not open. They're massive courses, but they're not massively open anymore, or never have been, as you're pointing out, maybe in Malaysia and other places. Is that partly what you're saying, Sanjaya? Did we lose you, Sanjaya?
Actually, if I can
Okay.
just say
Yeah.
something.
Soraini.
It's not that Malaysia blocks the MOOCs, but the fact that it's in the local language, that limits participation from people who do not speak the local language. So it's not like prevented, but it's not open because of the language issue.
Melinda's been shaking her head several times. I'm sure she has a few things she wants to say.
Oh, yeah. When we say MOOCs are open, our interpretation is that the materials that were used are OERs. Even the platform used in the MOOCs offering should also be an open source. I mean, no component of the MOOC should be copyrighted or of proprietary origin. But yes, I agree with Zoraini when she said that probably what makes a MOOC close is the language that is being used in the development of MOOCs. In the case of the Philippine MOOCs, the MOOCs that we are offering, probably it would not be of interest to others, probably those outside the Philippines, because the MOOCs that we offer are contextualized to the needs of the Filipino learners. So something like, while they are open courses, open to everyone, the skills that should be developed are designed, or the courses are designed to address the development of specific skills or the specific sectors of the Philippine society. So we contextualize the content, and because of that, they are probably not of general interest, and probably would not be of interest to others outside the Philippines, or could not relate to our context. So given that example, probably one could say that, like the Malaysian MOOCs, the Philippine MOOCs will also be closed because they will not be of interest. They are not of general interest. But the language issue, I think, like for instance, if there are Malaysian who are working or who are based outside Malaysia, they could very well understand the language, then probably they could still participate in the MOOC, and that will still make it an open MOOC because it's an open course for everyone to take as long as you understand the language.
I see we've got Sheila here. I'm assuming that's Sheila Jaganathan from the World Bank. Thank you, Mel. That's interesting. Sheila, if that is you and you want to make a comment for what the World Bank's doing here, Sheila will be helping us host the face-to-face session tomorrow that we're having here in Vancouver. Sheila?
Yes, Kurt, can you hear me?
Yes, and if you want to put your video on, you can.
Sure. I'm trying to do that, but for some reason I'm having a technical challenge. But okay. let me just weigh in. I mean, thank you first off for organizing such a rich exchange with so many countries, and it's really a great opportunity to learn both about what's going on, but also about some of the challenges. So from my perspective, where I sit at the World Bank, leading both the client and the staff learning, we are more targeting policymakers and practitioners with knowledge on sustainable development goals on a wide variety of topics, SDN goals, but also beyond and so on. And so we don't reach out to the youth or, the university students and so on. Our goal here is to try to improve policy so that there can be better governance and transparency and accountability in countries. So for this purpose, we are quite selective about what we use, the topics we use the MOOCs for, and it's usually cross-sectoral topics where we want people a call for action, like climate change, why a 4-degree warmer world should be avoided, or the importance of engaging citizens in decision-making and policy, or the public-private partnerships to offer better service delivery and so on. And we have found that the uptake to be fantastic. I'll talk about it at the pre-conference tomorrow. In each of these MOOCs, we have found we offer 2 tracks, a policymaker track as well as a general public track. And what we found is not only are people attending these MOOCs, but they are then, we've done some studies to see how they are applying it, then networking after the event, and so on and so forth. So MOOC is a vehicle for awareness raising, has huge potentials, and we can see it in the work we do. But I think for skills building and beyond awareness raising, these need to be scaffolded with other learning tools, as I believe Som, our colleague, had mentioned earlier. And we do that through action learning, facilitated e-learning, where we have global and local experts, or we do face-to-face in-depth workshops, blended learning, and so on. So I'll stop right there. And some of the challenges of language still remain. And the other important thing is that was raised, which we're also grappling with, is the issue of a business model for MOOCs. Too many people are coming out with MOOCs, and I think we need to consolidate, share content in terms of open resources so that we're all not reinventing the wheel.
I think that gets at Wayne Whitman's question here about, what he has in the chat window. Before we get to Wayne's question, Sanjaya has his hand up. I know Tel had some comments that he was making as well. Sanjaya, you had your hand raised for something?
Yeah, I think partly Melinda responded to that, and it's all about openness. Openness is particularly about open licensing of the content. If it is in Bahasa Malaysia or in Filipino language, it doesn't really matter, because if it is accessible and openly licensed, then anyone else can find utility, can translate the material into their own language, whether it will be Swahili or it can be in any other Afrikaans or Hindi. It can be translated. But the materials are closed. If we will consider materials are closed if it is not openly licensed. Its language is easy to tackle. If you find something interesting, then you can translate it. But if it is closed in terms of the licenses, that's the problem. And I think Melinda touched upon that to some extent. And the key issue to equitable access to educational resources in the developing world is to make everything open. And I thank Sila also. She also mentioned about that towards the end. Thank you very much.
Thank you. No, it's a common theme in your reading your work, Sanjaya. And you've written, and he's written a ton of things lately. Would you like to put anything in the chat window, a link to any of your current reports? You've got 2 or 3 things in the past couple of months that have come out that I've been reading. And so some big reports, some small reports, feel free to put those in.
Sure.
You want to plug any one of them? You want to mention one?
Yeah, sure. I will do that. The article on the open OER barriers in distance education, published in distance education. The editor is also Som Naidu, who is a speaker today.
Okay,
I was going to Kurt. I was going to avoid Sanjay embarrassing himself and speak about that myself, because I think it'll be a good piece for everyone to read. Sanjay wrote it's about 8,000 words, a reflective piece reflecting on issues around OER and open education, and is published in the Distance Education Journal, volume 38, number 3. So it'll be good. But can I take the opportunity to just reflect on a couple of points that I think?
Yes, please. Yes.
Sheila, hi Sheila, nice meeting you online for the first time. Reiterated, and I think in some ways, I wish that we began this conversation by looking at the idea of open education for starters, which is what I think, Curtis, you yourself, were alluding to, rather than holding the issue view of MOOCs, because MOOCs is one aspect of open education as I see it. Open education is a much broader phenomenon, much bigger concept that includes and comprises a lot of other ways of, making education, providing education to various communities. And open education comprises open learning, which is open access, and being able to learn and study from any time, any place, that kind of thing. And open source, of course. And now more recently, we're talking about things like open scholarship. So open education, in my mind, is a much bigger concept. And the MOOC phenomenon fits into that picture. And in many cases in the developing world, that is a very small component of open education. Universities and societies in the developing world have been in the business of open education for a very long time. And I've said that and I'll say it again. And I think, if we want to use MOOCs as a way of achieving certain goals in particular, then it makes sense. For example, as Sheila was saying, issues around climate change, which is a big thing in the Pacific. We are developing MOOCs in the area of climate change, ocean, marine science, and those kinds of things. And niche areas that the Pacific Island communities are good at and know more about than the rest of the world. And in that case, I think MOOCs is a very strong and effective and efficient way of getting that kind of message out to the various communities. So MOOCs fit into that agenda, but as a mainstream educational activity for opening up access to education, MOOCs is not going to cut it unless we can come up with better business models. Because leaders of institutions are saying to me, well, how is the organization going to make money out of this? Well, it is a conundrum that organizations have to deal with. Like, MOOCs is not about making money, you might say. Well, if it's not about making money, then who's going to pay for it? And someone's got to pay for it. So you see, that is a difficulty that we are dealing with. But having said all of that, MOOCs have a role to play. And that is what Sheila was saying, that they have a place and they have a purpose and it works for those kinds of things. But as a mainstream open educational activity, it is still, it has question marks in my mind and minds a lot of people that I'm talking to.
Thank you for that comment. It's very thoughtfully reflected upon. Does anyone want to expand on what Sam had to say or put their perspective on that issue?
Yeah, I can just add on to that, and I would agree with what Sam
Mel
is
has
saying.
her hand up too, so we'll go to Mel after you. Okay, great. Go ahead, Etienne.
Yeah. So when it comes to MOOCs and some of the, the discussions that I've had people talk about is that the MOOCs, only a few people can access them because, first of all, if you're trying to expand access to education using MOOCs, a lot of the learners are not able to kind of engage with the MOOCs on their own, just because of their level of, whether it's level of education or the language and so on. So the MOOCs tend to be accessed more by people who are already, maybe have graduated from a university in the North and so on. And so they're much more able to engage with the MOOCs than most of the students that are situated in the developing countries. For that reason, therefore, the MOOCs are not necessarily readily, or even they might be available, but the content might not be that readily or easily accessible to many of the students who do not have that level of education to be able to engage with them. And then I just wanted to add on the issue of language, like what the ABU has done with their open education resources was to be able to translate the OERs into French and Portuguese and English. So they were made available in those three languages because the countries they work with in Africa, you find they're either Francophone countries or Lusophone countries and so on. So in terms of when the OERs were developed, if it was developed in English, then it would be translated into French and Portuguese to make it more accessible to others. If it was developed in French, it would be translated into English and the other languages and so on. So I just wanted to add that in terms of language, but I'm yet to see, because somebody asked in terms of how's the translation done? For the ABU project, this project was funded by the African Development Bank. So they had to pay for this project, So maybe part of the reason why we don't see a lot of sustainability, I was talking about not seeing them being integrated well into the universities and seeing a continuity, maybe that, that funding is not there, or they were not done in a way that makes them sustainable beyond the initial project and so on. So that's it.
Okay. I know Tel had something to comment on earlier, but Mel had her hand up, so I'm going to go ladies first here. We'll go to Mel, and then we'll go to Tel. Mel and Tel. Okay.
Okay, yeah. Thank you very much, Kurt. I would like to respond to what Som raised earlier in terms of positioning MOOCs in a developing country, because that's what exactly where we are in. I would like to say that MOOCs by itself will not really create a big impact. There has to be additional or accompanying policies for MOOCs to really work and create an impact when it comes to providing or opening access to education in developing countries. So like for instance, in our case, if the concern is a digital divide or learners without access to the internet, then there has to be another project to provide the internet access to the learners whom we want to be part of the teaching learning environment in our MOOCs. So even opening access through MOOCs will not really solve the problem. We have to do more than opening access. We have to provide or enable our learners so that they can really access the courses that we are offering to them and really achieve this goal for MOOCs, and that is opening access to the disadvantaged sectors of the society. In the context of sustainability, there were questions here raised about sustainability and the business models for MOOCs. In our context, in the Philippines, since we are a public university, we were able to integrate a sustainability model to our MOOCs, and that is by integrating the workload credit to the professors, to the faculty members of the university who are developing MOOCs and who are handling MOOCs. So if you are a faculty member of our university, then you want to develop a MOOC or you want to coordinate the offering of a MOOC, then that will now be part of your workload. That will be counted as part of your workload. So there's no more question about where shall we get the money to pay the faculty members who will develop the MOOCs, or who will offer or who will teach the MOOCs, because that has been integrated into the workload credit of the faculty members. And because we are a public university, we are funded by the government, then that can count as our public service program and part of the function of the university.
Thank you, Mel. I'm not sure if Tel is still here from Brazil. I don't see, are you still here, Tel? We may have lost him. Wayne sent a couple of elaborate questions. Would you like to jump in, Wayne, and just go ahead and if you've got your audio, would you like to
Sure. Can you hear me?
Yeah. And where are you coming from, Wayne?
I'm at Georgia Tech down in Atlanta.
Right. Where they got the big programs down there, right?
Yeah. So I have a little different area. I have 8 engineering MOOCs. The problem is. I've written it in the chat bars, but the credentialing to make the MOOC of value for a sustainable business model, at least in engineering, the coin of the realm is transcript credit, and we're looking at different ways where students might be able to take a MOOC and then test out of a course for a lot cheaper than taking the full tuition and fees. Other opportunities where MOOCs can facilitate a cheaper way, and lots of users don't want to pay for MOOCs, but you have to have a portion of them that do to sustain the rest.
Can I, Wayne, were you stopping there? Can I just say something, Kurt?
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
In my university, there was an issue around this, Wayne, that I'm not sure how you might want to reflect on this. Certain programs, for example, architecture, law, MBA, and engineering, the curriculum and then the way it's taught is very much influenced by accreditation, professional accreditation agencies. And, those agencies are, they hopefully they would be changing their minds, but are very jittery about, any kind of flexible approaches to learning and teaching engineering. I mean, let alone MOOCs, they are even worried about, anything to do with, being away from laboratories and classrooms. So I'm not so sure what you're talking about. I'd love to hear more about it when you say, engineering can be taught in the for MOOCs. You know, that'd be something quite new to me.
Well, actually, at MIT and Georgia Tech, there have been experiments courses offered by MOOC where students can gain academic credit. And so you're seeing more and more of it. There's a lot of resistance, but there are ways to deliver quality engineering education and those types of topics, such that if you give proctored exams, some sort of advanced placement standing exam, if the students understand the student outcomes and they can demonstrate that, then schools are starting to be willing to give transcript credit for those students. That transcript credit, which is given by an advanced exam procedure, is much cheaper than a resident student who would be required to attend the classes and pay the full tuition and fees. So you're talking, you know, a tenfold decrease in the amount to get the same basic credential, academic transcript credit.
Yeah, you know, I certainly agree with that. I think innovative models, you know, have to be thought about in terms of. I think this is really taking us to the fourth question or the fifth question, Curtin. You know, you certainly run out of your time. You know, what are the opportunities and what are the suggestions and recommendations? I think you know, MOOCs are a great phenomenon. If I can just extend my comment, you know, Wayne, and I think, you know, accreditation agencies will come to the party as we become experted, as we become clearer and more innovative about how online education can be delivered on scale, on large scale, and that's what MOOCs are about, isn't it? Online education on a large scale. That's what it is, and I think, you know. It is up to instructional designers and educational designers to come up with those models that can be as effective and efficient and engaging as, you know, a small online course can be.
It might be good at this point to have read the question that you just alluded to. So, she'll cut and paste this into that window. Just so Wayne's aware, in my MOOCs book, the second chapter is from someone at Georgia Tech by the name of Karen Head, who is in the English area, and she has a more critical view on the use of MOOCs and how we incorporate them and think about cultural sensitivity in particular, and diversity. We also have a chapter from Richard DeMilo, who you probably know fairly well because he's from your program. Is that right?
Sure, I know both Karen and Rich, and I know, you know, everybody's experiences are different, and I am aware of Karen's thoughts. Actually, you know, my thoughts in engineering are somewhat different than I see in other disciplinary areas.
And Fatima Worth, I think is her name, who did the MOOC that ended up being more people than what Google Documents and whatnot could even handle, and had to disband it, is also at your university. Do you know her?
I do know her. That's a part of history that we're not we don't like to bring up that often.
She'll be coming to this. She usually comes to this conference, so I'll be talking to her tomorrow when I see her.
She's a very nice lady, and I mean, it was very early in the process, and it was a natural evolution that things like that were going to happen.
So I guess what I'm saying, Sam, is there are certain places like Georgia Tech, MIT, and a couple other places that Michigan, Duke, UPenn have been experimenting a lot in this area, and some of which have designed new models for accreditation or capturing credits. I saw Melinda again nodding her head when you started talking about credentialing that content. Did you want to comment on this, Melinda?
Yeah, actually, I agree with what Wade said in terms of putting value to the certificate, putting credits to the certificates earned by learners through MOOCs. But I would like to extend it further by saying that it's not only the educational institutions that we are looking at, but also the industry in terms of recognizing MOOC certificate when it comes to employment and even job promotion. So if we can put value to the certificate in terms of certificate recognition by educational institutions, by industries, then we can say the interest on MOOCs and even the completion rates for MOOCs would greatly improve. So if we can go further in terms of what Georgia Tech is doing, and that is really putting equivalent credits to the MOOCs, then MOOCs can really create bigger impact in terms of how our learners would access it, how universities would put value to it, and even, yes, put in a very good business model in terms of charging fees for certificate, because these certificates are assessment-driven certification. So I guess that can be one direction that MOOCs can do in the near future, because for a long time now, since the boom of MOOCs, that has been the question: what will be the sustainability model? What will be the business model? And we always have one answer, and that is the certificate. But certificate can only be a business model if the certificates will be recognized by educational institutions and even by the industry. So that has to be the direction that we should consider at this point in time.
I noticed we had Jingjing Zhang from Beijing Normal University join us, and I don't know if she caught the questions that we've been raising here, because they've been changing quite rapidly. So she's in the second hours group, but anyone can stay by all means for both hours, because I think we benefit from as many people as possible here. Jingjing, do you have audio? Have you tested?
Hello, hi Kurt, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hi everyone, it's good to join, and maybe I just first briefly introduce myself. And so I'm Jingjing Zhang from Beijing Normal University, and I'm associate professor working here at School of Educational Technology. And we have worked for many years in the area of distance education. I think I saw some of the participants here, and we know each other, and it's a great opportunity to meet actually virtually here in this conference. And also recent years, actually, our research center are gradually interested in MOOCs and OERs. We have conducted several empirical studies to trying to provide advice to our policymakers, because I think probably some of you know that in China, it's a top-down approach to develop MOOCs. So Ministry of Education is interested for our researchers in China to provide evidence and advice to support policies and in the next 10 years. So we've done some of those studies in these areas, and it will be interesting to share with each other and to talk about these issues.
Hey JZ, this is Som here. How are you?
Good, I'm good. It's great to meet here.
So you've gotten some grant money from your government for studying MOOCs, I know, in Beijing, right?
Yes. So we have a national project and initiated by the Ministry of Education to push us to actually find evidence what kind of policy actually they could devise to universities. Because, you know, in the previous years with OERs, usually the Chinese government always talk about have 1,000 OERs or MOOCs available, for example, by 2017. But this is not sufficient enough to actually to guide how institutional leaders to what to do in their university. So we've conducted some researchers trying to find out actually what's happening worldwide. So we've done a study that to using the international MOOCs to create a complex network. And in these networks, we're trying to find out actually what, for example, Harvard, MIT, and other universities have done in the past using a network analysis and trying to project that actually the network structure that they have been worked previously years influence the development of MOOCs in their own institutions. So it's not saying you want to create a MOOCs in certain area, you can do it. It's actually hugely influenced by your existing disciplinary framework and structure.
I noticed that we have a chat window question here comment coming from Illinois. Basically, the MBA program in some places like Duke and University of Illinois, where she is, and other places are finding ways to monetize MOOCs and not really looking at these MOOC content as OER, but looking at it as a profit center. And so Illinois has dropped the costs of their MBA for, just like Georgia Tech dropped their costs of their computer science degrees and engineering, perhaps degrees as well, and are looking as a way to bring in monies as opposed to looking at it as a way to, well, not just as a way to create open content. Hannah, did you want to add to that? This is your question or comment. Maybe we've lost Hannah, but that was her comment in the chat window there. I don't see her here now. So, but I'm sure we've all recognized that fact that you have read this. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to point out that I think there are different kinds of MOOCs. You know, when George CM in Canada, when he started MOOC, it was sort of a different version of a MOOC that we see today. And I agree with, I think it was Sam, I agree with his point. You know, OER is a little bit more broader sort of umbrella, and MOOC is just one of the OER. However, if we are going to include the open license as a part of a MOOC definition, I don't think we're going to go very far. I mean, I've seen at least a lot of OER, not OER, MOOCs that have been created by Western higher education. I mean, they're not going to give up their content. They're not going to give away, you know, content as a OER license. So, you know, so then is OER, I mean, MOOC is actually open education. I think, you know, what do we mean by that? You know, are we going to just say open education as long as it has openness? Is that still part of open education? So I think some of the points that people kind of made, you know, in terms of a definition, I think that's a very good point. And I just wanted to point out that, you know, there are different kinds of MOOCs, and a lot of MOOCs, at least at my institution. I mean, I just talked about IMBA, and, you know, computer science, they wanted to have a master's degree program in MOOC. And I mean, we have a couple of departments, they wanted to offer MOOC, a master's degree program in MOOC. So, you know, apparently they are not, they have offer open access, but they are not necessarily OER. So I just wanted to point out there are different kinds of MOOC.
Any, I see Mel's got her hand up. Other people, I want to make sure, some people I can't see a visual of you. Tempany, or we'll come back to Mel in a second. Tempany, would you like to jump in and address this, or anything you've heard previously? Because we haven't heard from you in a bit here. There you are. Hi.
Can you see me?
Yes, but great.
Wow. And actually that you mentioned about sustainable for MOOC or the opportunity. I think that the enhanced number of the MOOC courses, I think that all around the world that we also expand the number of MOOC courses so that it is not only for the university but also for enhance for the lifelong learning. This is important. This is a point that we can learn until we die, right? So that some people do not need the credit from the courses except for the university student. So that this is the way for expand the MOOC courses. If we continue to the people who finish from the university to the office, and when they retire, they can learn until they die. So that this is a way to enhance the MOOC courses. And then if we encourage the people love to learn and need to learn, I think that the number of the MOOC courses can expand a lot, so that for the Thailand side, we also expand a lot of the MOOC courses. Right now, there are over 150 courses and 10 or 50,000 of people also attend this course. So that's sure that we start from the university student, and I think that we also we also like the for the people for the lifelong learning, and also we also give the certificate and the nano program, and in the future we also enhance for no degree program just for learning and get the knowledge. Also think that is my opinion. Thanks.
Thank you, Tampani. I think what you're saying is that the goal no longer is strictly credits. The goal no longer is strictly programs. The goal today is lifelong, and it may be interest, it may be curiosity, it may be life fulfillment, it may be a range of things that we're engaging in these contents. It's not just to get a credit, and that's part of my research, is finding that most people are not in it for the credits. They're no longer in it for the degrees. That's maybe 20% or 30% or 40%, but the majority are in it for some other reasons. And we just haven't understood that well enough in the past. And now we're starting to better understand some of these alternative reasons for taking courses beyond just getting a credential. And this sounds like an area that Mel or Sam would know, or Zarani would know a lot about. Any of the three of you want to jump in on this?
You're right, Kurt. That's exactly the point that I was trying to get at. You know, there's two sides to the coin. One is that, students might want to take something, not necessarily for credit. And this is a point that Sanjay has made, and we've seen research around that, that students take MOOC, we all take MOOCs just because we want to learn something, we don't necessarily want to complete it and get a certificate. So that's one side of the equation. And the previous speaker, I don't want to mispronounce her name, is absolutely right that we have an obligation to offer people those kinds of opportunities as opposed to just learning it by themselves, and that's not something new. The other side of the coin is, all right, who's going to provide that service and for what cost? When I have a conversation with my superiors and they're saying, all right, that's fine, I can, remunerate a professor or ask a professor or a group of professors to develop a MOOC and or build it in their work profile or work commitments, whatever it might be. But how can I expand it to make sure that this is happening on a systematic basis and across the institution? So how many MOOCs are we able to offer in that way? How are we going to get academics or specialists to develop MOOCs? So both those issues have to be resolved. And I think this takes me back to one final point that I'll make is what Sheena was talking about, that even in open universities that I've worked in, through quite a number of the regions of the world, people have to still get their head around what is open education and what are the commitments that educators and governments and organizations have towards lifelong learning, towards educating the masses when these are publicly funded organizations. So, for example, I'm having a battle with my senior administrators who are in the business of open learning and distance education to offer MOOCs, because they are looking at how MOOCs are going to be sustainable, who is going to provide for the costs of this. They want to see how MOOCs can make money for them. Mm-hmm. And this is really counter the argument, isn't it? MOOCs were not designed for that purpose in the first place, So I think, advocacy and mindset change and policy development are the things that we need to focus on at the institutional level in order to achieve open education and open educational practices, because that's the end game.
So part of your opening line was that, and what I take it is that we have a culture that looks at formal education as the end-all and be-all. And so when the media talks about people dropping out of these MOOCs as if they're something, Sanjay's work, my work, others' work points out that many people are in it for just a short snippet or a piece. How do we break that mindset out of we're in it to get a course completion, a degree completion, a credential of some kind, and we might only be in it for something much different than when the way we were raised in formal education. The goals are different today than they were in the past. Who's going to help change that mindset out there? Or how can we change that mind? Does anyone have any ideas of how we're going to have this cultural mindset change?
There was a paper that Sanjay would know very well because he's been promoting that paper that we published in Distance Education in volume 38, number 3, which is the journal in which issue in which Sanjay published his issue. There's a paper coming out of the Open University of Netherlands, and what they did a
yeah, he sent me that. Yeah, good.
Oh, yeah, there you go.
Tell everybody about that one.
Yeah, well, so that's the kind of research we need, which is looking at the factors, various other factors that are the cause of or they lead to people dropping out of any kind of course, not necessarily MOOCs, I mean, drop out or stop out or whatever you want to call it, or attrition is a result of many factors. It's not just because you just look at the number of people came in and the number of people went out and then you suddenly draw some conclusions. I mean, that's an uneducated conclusion. So it is up to people like us and the people and the various members of our community to educate people on how to look at issues that have to do with dropout or retention or attrition from courses. So what can you say? More research, more information, more advocacy, more dissemination is the answer.
More time.
More time, yes. No, don't worry. There'll be other people behind us. So don't worry.
Yep. Mel, you've been trying to jump in about 10 times here. I've been cutting you off, so go ahead.
Yeah, actually there are few things that I want to talk about, and that is the concept of completion, the changing of mindset, why we are so much into this degree completion, probably because it's the kind of system that we are in. You look for a job, then you would be asked, what degree have you completed? So unless we change the system, then there's no way we can change the system by which we are looking at MOOCs. But then again, how else can we validate the learning of a student, the learning of an individual, if it's not through assessment and if it's not through certification system? So it's just a chicken and egg thing. Unless we break that kind of cycle, then there's no way we can get away from this mindset of looking at the degree completion, looking at certificate, looking at diploma, simply because that's the whole system that we are in. Probably, if we can just look at the skills, show me what you know, by doing it, then probably that's it. And that can be done by going through courses without even completing it. In our discussion at the university, I often say that I really don't care about completion rate, because what I care about is our courses being open, our courses being accessible to everyone, because by just watching video materials, by just looking at participating in a discussion, I would like to believe that an individual has learned something. But who would certify to that kind of learning unless you subject that individual to some sort of assessment? Because that's still the kind of system that we are in. So that's one. And also I would like to the point raised earlier in terms of the kind of MOOCs that we are developing. There was a point raised earlier that many MOOCs are not really open. Some materials are not OERs because there is probably a different purpose for the development of that particular MOOC. It was mentioned that the purpose is really just to lower the cost of education for those who are taking the particular program. In the context of the Philippines, we develop our MOOCs to be OERs. That's why everything that we use into our MOOCs are all OERs, because we consider our MOOCs as also OERs. Therefore, a teacher can use a particular MOOC in his or her course, enroll the students there, enrich the learning environment, the teaching learning environment, and design the course, the residential course, such that the content will be coming from a MOOC. So in a way, we design the MOOCs to provide the content to a particular course or subject that is being taken or being offered by other universities. It is also our way of training the teachers, providing them the content. So in a way, we developed our MOOCs, we designed our MOOCs so that they can be OERs and which can be used for teaching by the other teachers in their own teaching.
Mel, can I ask you this before we go to Jingjing has a question, but I want to get your perspective. You've moved through your system at the University of the Philippines Open U from a low level to now the chancellor. Would your ideas, or how have your ideas changed, especially recently as you've taken on this newer position as chancellor, as opposed to when you're a program head or just an instructional designer, or how would your perspective change in this, and who do you have to report to now that's different from who you had to report to on all this before?
Okay, Kurt, let me add something. I am also the president of the Asian Association of Open Universities.
Right, yeah, that's right, yeah, even more so, okay.
Okay, so how did my perspective change? Actually, when I started my practice as in distance education, it was just really democratizing access. Democratizing access, meaning to say that we want to reach more learners where the residential universities could not reach them. But when I became chancellor, as I do ascend the ladder, my perspective has become more of opening access and not just democratizing access. So it's really more of opening the doors to the marginalized learners and the disadvantaged sectors, and not only to those who are qualified to access these courses. So from democratizing to opening access, and also from access to equity of learning outcomes. So from, access, equity of learning outcomes, tangible learning outcomes. So those are the shifts. Those are the shifts that I've undergone in this journey. Now, from the Philippines to the region, that's also another journey. Now I'm looking more of collaboration among open universities, transfer credits, but more also of the quality framework among all the courses that we are offering at the open universities. So those things.
So quality now becomes more salient than earlier.
Yes, more so now. And also my perspective is that we have to move the discourse, shift the discourse of quality from just simply framework to quality being the culture. Mm. It's not just a checklist, you know. When you talk of quality, it's not just, have you done that, blah, 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 blah. But the process and it being integrated into the workplace, into everything that you are doing in developing courses, materials, etc., and offering the course. It is now a culture.
We're going to have two areas to finish up on here. We're probably going to be done earlier than we thought. Future directions and gaps are at least two areas we haven't addressed yet. Before we get to that, Jingjing has raised her hand several times. And if anyone else, I think Etiano's raised her glasses a couple of times, her hand as well. So we have to get to those before we get to future directions and gaps. I want the rest of you to think about those things. What are things we're not addressing that we might address? And also, as a third, or as part of that gaps, tomorrow in the face-to-face session that we're here, what kinds of things do you think we should be talking about and during our breakout sessions? What kinds of topics might we form small teams on to try and address? So think about that. Let's go to Etiano and Jingjing. Let's start with Jingjing. You want to jump in on anything someone said or something else you would like to discuss? You're muted. We'll have to unmute you.
Okay, I just want to comment on the previous what someone raised, why we are so interested in the degree completion. I think from our perspective, it's not just because of the culture that we have been used to our degree, the formal education. Part of the reason that we think that it's because we lack of research evidence to show that actually we can have multiple assessment, or maybe the assessment of the learning experience can be strong enough or confident. We are confident enough to say actually if we assess the students' learning experience, that actually can become part of their the evaluation. So like we had a conference like 2 weeks ago in China with the deputy of Ministry of Education. Before, as a researchers, we think actually those policymakers don't really understand why they don't have why they don't reform our evaluation. For example, Gaokao, the Chinese entrance of examination. Because of this actually influence the degree completion. Everyone wants to get through the examination and get the degree. Why the policymaker don't actually reform it? And the policymaker was saying is because you guys as researchers haven't provided strong research evidence to show there are alternative ways. For example, evaluation the learning process, learning experience. So that's actually part of the research in learning analytics should be actually to work on the assessment evaluation in the future to prove that actually we have authentic evaluations through the multiple times, even the student drop out. And when they come in, we have robust actually evaluation tools, or maybe evaluation measures that to show the students are doing good enough to get to the university or to get a job, right? So I think that's actually a priority for our researchers to think about how to actually identify the evaluation measures in terms of the time, the learning process, learning experience, participation, engagement, all sorts of things to prove that it's equivalent or alternative ways to change our formal education to assess students at one point and a static one. And also another thing.
Wait a minute. That sounds so well thought out. Are you reading from a research proposal here or a grant proposal? That sounds.
Okay. All right.
Okay. So I'm sorry. Go ahead. You're going to say something else.
Another thing I want to mention is actually we published the paper in distance education. And I think some knows. In that paper, we studied the forum interactions in MOOCs. And instead of interested in the dropouts, what we find actually, we were studying it from a network perspective to understand if the interactions, individual students, to constitute a network, if this network is robust enough, like to use all these studies in the electricity's network. If it is robust enough, actual student dropout doesn't matter, because it doesn't actually have a significant impact on the student bodies to have this peer-to-peer learning, to constitute a good peer-to-peer learning environment. So I think educational researchers also need to think about something innovative perspective to study our learning experience, not to just to trying to get a static snapshot at one point and to say this is what students learn in MOOCs, because it's a dynamic learning process. People drop out, come in, and that actually is a basis of fundamentals to support this openness, right? If you open, then you allow people to drop out and then come in. That's actually the nature of this MOOCs. So we, in terms of allowing the dropouts and how we understand this dynamic learning process is important. And we need also some new methodology to study these issues.
Very well said. Before we go to Tiano, let's see if anyone would like to comment on what you had to say there. Anyone want to counter or add to or ask her a question about what Jingjing had to say?
Totally agree with Jingjing, and I think she's done some wonderful work there. A lot of the things she was saying don't that surprise you, because that's what she does. That's what she's thinking about all the time. So it's probably second nature to her. But I think the point that I think she's making, and I agree with her, is that we have had enough of MOOCs the way they've been. I think the challenge for the future is for us to come up, and for this community to come up with more innovative designs of large-scale online courses. Let's not call them MOOCs, whatever they might be. These are large-scale online courses, and we need to come up with innovative designs, robust assessment strategies that can be defended in any fora, in any kind of environment, community. That's the challenge for the future. That's the opportunity for the future. Till we come up with that, you know, we are going to be open to criticism.
Sounds like this is Jing Jing's next book she's going to be working on. But and if anyone caught any British accent in her voice, it's because she studied in the UK. I met her at Oxford when she was studying there.
That's right. That's right.
I hear a little British accent in your voice as well. But
oh well, you know, yeah. Oh, British heritage, yeah.
That's what I thought. All right, so Itiano. Your turn. And also Mihan from UT Austin has written in the chat window. Mihan, we'll come to you if you would like after Etiano. So be ready to ask us or comment on your question.
Okay. Yeah, so I just wanted to add on to something that Melinda said that resonated, which was, you know, this aspect of the culture of quality, so that we have to, you know, just go beyond. For me, I feel like we have to go beyond open education resources and look at open education practices, which is now an area that I'm very interested in. When you talk about how do we sustain these open education resources, how do you get buy-in, or how do you integrate it much more into the, like in the case of the universities that ABU works with, into the institutions. So it goes beyond just a resource, but how do we begin to talk about open education practices and looking at aspects of use, repurposing, creation, and sharing. I'm especially interested in how, you know, faculty can be empowered, or student teachers, to be able to create OERs, even if they're just starting from small objects to maybe textbooks and so on. And so those are some of the areas which I probably would be interested in working on in the future in terms of future direction. So the aspect of open pedagogy, you know, I've seen some discussions on that, and, you know, it still seems to be an emerging area that I will, you know, would be interested in exploring when it comes to this aspect of how do we bring in quality when it comes to open education resources, and how do we empower learners and faculty in terms of developing skills and knowledge in this area.
Which leads me to a question, Etiano. If my friend Ka here, who's very tired from flying like I am today, decides to do a book or a special journal issue at the end of our session tomorrow, who here today in this virtual forum would be interested in perhaps considering to contribute a chapter to either a special issue or a book related to some of the comments and content we've been discussing here now. The last two times we've done a special symposium, they both have ended up becoming books and special journal issues. This time, I'm not sure if we're going to do one, to be honest, but it's a good time as any. Would anyone here raise your hands or put in the chat window, yes, I'd be interested. Just go ahead and type in that now would be a good time to chat in, or go ahead verbally if you would like to say something. Hey, Tiano, you're up. Would you like to contribute if we do one?
Yeah, absolutely. I would be interested. It just depends on how much time you'll give me, but, you know, that would be an interesting project, definitely, to get involved in. So, sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Anyone else want to comment? Tampani? You still with us, Tampani?
Hello.
Hello.
But the comment is, I think that we're gonna start from our instructor to teach via MOOC or via online learning for OER to support the online learning. So that if we start from the instructor, the student should be the learner lover, so that if mixed together with instructor and student, and for everyone can be the student, right? If they love to learn, even in the DNA of the learner, so that we can learn via MOOC or via the online. Absolutely, this is learning society that we can enhance everything. No boundary, no nation, no religion, no book. We also call community of learning. I think that we is my suggestion.
Thank you. Well said. Any other comments before we go to Mihan with her comment or question? Anyone else want to jump in and comment on anything said? Mihan, would you like to ask your question that you have in the chat window?
Well, first of all, I'm a PhD student at the UT Austin, so that could be one of the reasons that I kind of came up with questions. And I think it's such an intellectual, like a challenge to be in here, and then like really great opportunity to see how research and all things are going on around the globe. I'm just sitting in my like student apartment in Austin, Texas. So what a great opportunity. Thank you for doing this, and all of you guys. My question was related to, like eventually how MOOCs can differentiate like students like learning experiences. I think that can be one of the core challenge of the current MOOC situation, because a lot of us already talked about it can be only focused on the knowledge part, not so much about the students like maybe attitude or more like a deeper learning knowledge. So is it MOOC can also support that level of experience? I think that can be one of the reasons that we are constantly trying to evaluate the value of the MOOC. Is it really valid? Someone's degree from like a really, really highly appreciated university compared to MOOC, can we see the same thing? Or should we even try to compare that?
Does anyone want to comment on what she has to say there?
Yeah.
Anyone have a response about that? Is it something happening today that might be different tomorrow? Yeah, go ahead, Jingjing.
Okay, so I had a point, but hasn't approved yet. But what we were doing, actually, I always tell my students we need to be confident enough not to think about actually MOOCs should be compete with the formal education that the unique university the education we have now. We need to think further actually with those open flexible learning environment. What's actually the potential that this open flexible learning environment could provide. So my point is that we don't compare the MOOCs with formal education we have, but MOOCs can do alternative or more that our formal education could provide to us. So in terms of that one of the research, a small project we're doing is about the hypertext. Because we think that's actually the potential of the interaction or this non-linear cognitive thinking comes into that the online education provide to us. But for previous many years, we didn't really look at these issues. We were thinking what we can offer similar learning experience as our formal education could, or maybe authentic enough to prove that the learning experience that we had in our online education is equivalent or similar to what we have in our traditional formal education. But at some point, we forgot actually the power of this interactivity and the hypertext has provided to us that Ted Nielsen actually proposed many, many years ago.
Right.
I invented it into the word W, and it was actually didn't really take this advantage of this hypertext. So and I think some was organized a conference this year, and one of the keynote speech was mentioned actually, maybe we need to be confident enough to say actually what open education could provide us more. But the situation actually is because in China it's also the same situation as those practitioners who are practice open education was from the radio and TV universities, which is recognized as a second tier education for many past years. So in these kind of situations, we're lack of confidence to actually claim that open education could provide us more in terms of the learning experience and in terms of the learning design. So I think when MOOCs comes into grab the attention of the public, then we should be confident enough to say and also our research work also need to find evidence to find out actually what's the potential and what's the advantages that open education could provide some more compared to the traditional education.
Well said again. And I guess you've got a grant. You've been thinking about this for a while. Mihon had a question about whether there's an open pedagogy center. Is anyone exploring open pedagogy? And I think maybe Future Learn people are a little bit in the UK. Anywhere else exploring open pedagogy? I know I've heard the term open pedagogy in a few places. Does anyone know who are some of the main contributors in that area? Perhaps Michael Sharples at Future Learn in the UK OU might be someone that they have an annual report on pedagogy and technology, and it's quite informative. He publishes. He's a publishing machine. Mike Sharples. Take a look at his work. Jing, are you aware of his work?
Yes, Michael. He's a very good friend.
Yeah, okay.
We organized some annual conference at BNU with him, and he's very good, and he's very productive.
Yeah. And the reports are the recent couple are on open pedagogy kinds of things. So I would take a look at his work.
Right.
So now should we go to the future and go to the gaps? And we can go near future. Near future would be what should we talk about tomorrow at the face-to-face, and medium or far future, medium future. What are you going to be working on next? What are the things that your institution, your organization, or you personally, your research team might be exploring in this area of open education and in the developing world? And what far future, what might new discoveries might be made, or what might people be looking at? So any of those, near future, one day from now, tomorrow, medium future, and far future. Grab any of the three, and Sam, let's start with you, because I see all the other three are thinking deeply now and don't want to go first. So Sam, I'm going to put you on the spot here. What do you think?
Well, for starters, I must thank you both. Thank you, Kurt, for bringing such a powerful team together and such a disparate group of people. And fortunately, between the two of us and amongst other people, Sanjay included, as many of us, we know each other. I know Jing and several others quite well. So this has been a great experience for me.
I agree.
A couple of takeaways for me, and Jing I think summed it up very well. I think the immediate future in the short term, I don't want to sound like the Horizon Report kinds of thing. Better designs, learning experience designs for the new generation of MOOCs. I think we need to get our act together. Nobody said that MOOCs have to have 10-minute videos. Where did the idea of video snippets come in MOOCs? They just happen. There's no rule or law saying that MOOCs have to have videos. So I think we have to come up with better learning designs for the next generation of MOOCs so that they can be sustainable, they can be robust, they can be convincing. I think that's number one. Number two, I think, alongside with that, I think we need better ways of assessing learning outcomes so that they can be defensible amongst the community of people who are very much, concerned about quality of learning and quality of outcomes and that sort of thing. So those are my two contributions in relation to that, Kurt.
Very thoughtful for a quick answer. Thank you for that. Anyone else want to jump in? You've had a chance to think about this. Tampani, would you like to try a second stance? Where's MOOCs in Thailand headed, or where is open education? You're at the Thailand Cyber University. What would you like, to add to this conversation?
Yeah, for Thailand Cyber University, we are gonna Hello?
Yep, go ahead.
Okay. For Thailand SOIM University, we also try to support all Thai MOOC, not only for the courses, but also for the whole curriculum. Example, this year we're gonna ask the university to collaborate with Japan, Korea, to open some curriculum, data science, tourism, and hospitality. This is one or two of example. We think that if we start from the university, the student can learn, and next step, when they finish from the university, they will go to work in the office. It is actually they can learn like that. They can learn again when they have a worker, and they can learn again when they retirement, and also that lifelong learning that I mentioned. Actually, for the Thailand, I think that MOOC is like not an innovation. We call it technology, educational technology. That this is a pathway for Thai people learning. And for the future of MOOC in Thai and other countries, especially for the region and all the world, I think that they have the increase the number, and the MOOC courses is like the university work together, and they expand a lot of the courses for the people can access. For this course, we can learn anywhere, anytime. That we also propose a lot of the mission of the online learning. I think that enhance of MOOC can push the people to be the lifelong learner. That's it.
Thank you. And I go back to what Sam had to say, is that it's been great having people come in here from Thailand and China and Fiji and Antigua and Brazil and Kenya and Philippines and so forth and so on, and Fiji. And you know, this is very unique to try and do. I'm enjoying having this. You may have been hearing my phone go off a couple of times here. There's a lot of people showing up at the conference all of a sudden, and people are starting to contact me about, where are you? And what are we doing tomorrow? So, you know, the excitement's starting to build here, and I'm glad we're able to have this pre-conference, the pre-conference, even build it more. This is the first time we've run a pre-conference symposium and had a virtual session to augment it and expand on it. It's the first time we're trying this, and I think having Sheila from the World Bank and Sanjaya coming in from Commonwealth of Learning to even add to. We had 8 experts here. We've had 2 extra experts, and then Ka here coming from Wayne State. That's 11, and I'll include myself as a semi-expert. That's 11 and a half. But we've had, you know, this is really fun to orchestrate, and we've got a couple people like you know, my friend Hannah and Mihun, who are both from Korea originally, so we get a Korean perspective in all this, and other perspectives are being raised. So it's definitely been enjoyable. Let's go now to Mel and to Adriano and to Jingjing. Future directions, gaps, what's next, what's coming up in the future? Go ahead.
Yeah, for me, there are 3 things that I have in my mind right now, and first is the very near future is the learning analytics, big data, data mining. What can it bring to us? How can it help us in order to improve like completion rates, providing learner support to our students? So that's one. What can the big data tell us? Of course, we still talk about quality. Because everything will depend on the quality of courses that we offer, especially when it comes to MOOCs. The third thing is course design, which is learning-centered. So it's not learner-centered, but learning-centered. How can we design our MOOCs such that the center of the design is the learning of the students? So that's the third. The fourth is how can we anchor all these initiatives to the Sustainable Development Goals, which is the inclusive lifelong learning. So those are the four things that I'm looking at now, and which can configure in our near, mid-year, or the long-term plans for our MOOCs, and how we will look at our MOOCs in the future direction for our MOOCs.
Let me point out that first comment on big data. I'm now listening to a book called Everybody Lies. It's all about big data. I'm enjoying it tremendously. It's a little bit edgy, so it's a little on the liberal side, but overall it's a brilliant book by a a person who has an economics degree at Harvard, looking at people's Google searches to understand people's trends that are happening in society. Everybody Lies. It's very interesting. That's the first thing I wanted to mention. The second thing that I wanted to mention was that I'm not sure who started this conversation. I also didn't mention Brazil. We had Brazil here. I wasn't the first one in. Whoever was the first one to open this is probably going to get the file at the end. And so Mayna, my assistant, Mayna, are you still here? You like to say hello and put your video on, Mayna?
Yeah, sorry, Hi everyone, my name is Mayna. I'm a third-year PhD student at IU. Dr. Duncan is my advisor.
Your master's degree is from?
My master's degree is from Beijing Normal University. I met Jing 2015 one time. Yeah.
And you're studying what part of MOOCs now?
Right now, my study is focusing on MOOC design considerations and the challenges that the instructors they faces. And yeah.
And we're also looking at cultural sensitivity and personalization and other things.
Yeah,
but if you were the first one here, Mayna, my point is you're going to get the file at the end. I'm not sure if you're the first one. If you open up the file, I think you'll get the file at the end. I don't think I'll get it, even though
I don't think I'm the first one came here. When I came here, I think Som.
Maybe you'll get the file then. Okay. Yeah. So whoever gets the file, let me know. It will save on your machine, and just save it and put it in Dropbox and send it to me. Maybe I'll get it because I created the link. But anyhow, we have two more people to hear from. That's Etiano and Jingjing to give us their predictions of the future. And anybody else wants to predict the future? So Jingjing, you want to jump in? We'll let Etiano go last and have the sage advice at the end. So Jingjing?
Yes. So for me personally, and I think I had a very short future vision that just to finish up all the work that I'm currently working on. So, but all this work I think share the same vision that we first need to think about the learning is different online, and no matter it's OERs, MOOCs, or it's traditional online education, but starting from that learning is different, then we need to think about what a kind of new methodology or perspective we should be taking in order to study the nature of online learning, and which is different from the traditional formal education that we experience every day. So taking into that point, then I think the future direction, what I would suggest for myself is I look at learning that as a learning process to take into the time into consideration. So we're not studying learning at one point. We want to understand actually in a longer period of time how learning occurs. And so that will actually take into account dropouts and coming students, and also at a massive scale. So it's not like look at individual learning. So because it's MOOCs actually what brings in is a massive body of students that we've never had before in our formal classrooms. So taking into consideration all the massive body of students, and also in a longer period of time, what kind of perspective we should be taking in order to study this kind of learning. If we have strong evidence enough, then our researchers that who work in this area could be confident enough to say this is different and this is our future, and which we could in China, because we advise to the Ministry of Education, we could be confident enough to say this is how you should be reforming in our educational system. And even the last time we had the meeting with the Deputy of Ministry of Education, and he was saying, if you're confident enough, then we could do it. It's a top-bottom approach. But every time they ask our researcher, we're not confident enough. We haven't got strong research evidence to support that in a longer period of time and with massive student body that we could approve that this learning is different and it's beneficial and how this is the future of our education. And this is part of the at a macro level, we're trying to understand that the nature of learning in this online flexible learning environment. And another direction what BNU was approaching is at a macro level. We're trying to study all these courses at a global level, not just to take into, for example, if you want institutional leaders want to do, we're not only doing case study. We will not only look at one institution, what they have been done. We want to take all these courses together. So one of the study is looking at all the courses together from the worldwidely to trying to project the past, that institutional past that they have been developed in the past. And another one study that we were doing is if we think actually this is a new learning environment, and traditional in our university system, the knowledge is still packed into disciplinary boundaries, into disciplinary all this, and training still be given in each discipline, right? If you are in the psychology department of psychology, you are being treated as a psychologist. If you're in the education technology and you have all these core program, you have the program which you have core courses and you have elect courses. But we were thinking if we taking the initial point, learning is different, then this online education might provide you more flexibility to allow interdisciplinary training, which actually prepares for the 21st century skills. So that taking that point, we're also trying to study how these courses together to create an interdisciplinary framework for the students to be flexible to learn. And that's also another project we're doing. Yeah.
Have you written that up and published any of that?
So it's
say no so I can publish that.
It's in the draft.
I'll have you write the foreword to my next book. Okay, so it sounds like what I want to write about. So thank you very much for that.
We should
collaborate. Okay, good. We'll talk. We will do so. We will do so. And okay. Etiano and Sheila, since you're here, I'll let you give the World Bank perspective on what you've heard tonight as a final closing. And Sam, if you want to say a final word as well. Etiano.
Okay, thank you, Kat and Kay, for organizing this symposium. So I really enjoyed it and listening to all the different perspectives from all the different countries and institutions. So hopefully we'll see what comes out. It was a very enriching experience. I'm finally awake now at 5 a.m. So
let's give her a round of applause for coming early in the morning here.
Yeah. So, I mean, for me, I just want to say again, definitely very interested in seeing how we can be able to create content and to empower our student teachers, faculty in terms of creation of open education content and the aspects of quality and how OERs and open pedagogy can be used to improve quality. Teacher training is definitely one area that I'm very interested in. For example, in Kenya now, there's an initiative to put laptops for each, first graders, so that, every first grader should have, that's a government-led initiative. And so teachers are saying, yes, but we don't know how to, to use technology and so on. So there is a need for teacher training in terms of integrating technology and what is the role of open education and MOOCs and so on in terms of supporting them in these areas, and how do we link those up with the sustainable development goals. So those are some of the areas that, I'm definitely interested in looking at and pursuing, and definitely all the other things that people have talked about here as well. So thank you.
It's been great to have you. I'm glad you were able to wake up. And do you go to work right after this, or are you going to go back to bed?
No, I'm not going back to bed now. I just get up and get ready for the day.
How far away is your work setting from where you live?
Today I have some errands to run, so I'm but I have to leave in a few hours, like by 9 a.m. And we also are having some political demonstrations and so on. So people are work is kind of slowed down right now because I don't know how many of you know this, but the elections in Kenya were overturned by the Supreme Court. So we have to go back to the ballot. So there's been some demos and so on. So probably has slowed down things in terms of people going to work and school and so on.
Be glad you can go back and revote. We were wishing we could revote in America.
Yeah, we hope we have a good outcome.
Don't even go there. Cut this one out.
I'm sorry, I had to say it, but what's your new job title and where are you working?
Currently?
Yes.
I'm setting up my own consultancy. So far I'm working with some universities in terms of helping them. They're interested in having their distance learning systems reviewed. There's a university I'm working with that wants to be able to offer or update their system and so on. And so that's what I'm doing, doing consulting work right now.
Congratulations on that.
Yeah, thank you.
You can send me more on email. We can chat after. So Sheila or Sam, as the senior people here, I hate to call you the senior people, but Tampani is as well. Would you like to offer a final closing statement or comments on anything you've heard? Sheila? We don't hear you. She might be gone. So if we don't hear from Sheila, I don't hear her. So Sam, would you like to make a closing statement?
Well, I'm certainly glad that you put me second after Sheila. I'm certainly not in a league, you know. So I'm not. You said two senior people. She is a lot more senior than I am. But never mind. Listen, Kurt. I did say thank you very much for putting this team together. This has been a wonderful group of people, such an exciting group of people from all around the world. And the technology works. I mean, things are certainly getting better, isn't it? I think we should do more of this. The only passing comment that I'd like to make, and I'll try and pick up on a couple of ideas that have been put out by a few people, is that it would make sense for us to, instead of talking about things like MOOCs as individual activities, that we concentrate on talking about a bigger and broader concept, and that is open educational practice or open education, because that's the umbrella term under which, you know, various kinds of open learning activities come under, including things like, you know, open access to learning, open source, and open scholarship, which is where MOOCs fit in. So I think, you know, it would be useful for organizations and academics and administrators to think about open educational practices as an umbrella term, as an alternative, as Jingjing says. You know, that's an alternative model to the conventional educational practices, and the second part of it is how we can make that kind of educational activity as robust as possible, so that it is seen as a legitimate and powerful, as effective, if not better, approach to learning, cost-effective as well and efficient than any kind of conventional educational practices that we have known of. And we won't be the first. I mean, again, I go back to the comment that Jingjing made. I mean, several meta-analyses coming out of, you know, particularly in Concordia University in Montreal, and Bob Bernard and his group have done quite a bit of work, you know, demonstrating through very rigorous methods that, you know, that various kinds of distance education methods, which is one form of open educational practice, is, if not equal to, but better than and more powerful than conventional educational practices. So that's the kind of research that Jingjing is talking about, that, you know, the governments want. And unless we can put that out to people in a systematic and a robust and convincing way, you know, mindsets will never change. And I think we have to do that. So this is why, let's not be carried away by hype. You know, terms like open pedagogy and these sorts of things, you know, make me squirm, because they are not new. You know, we know a lot about learning and teaching and what works and what doesn't work, both in online and other kinds of environments. So let's cut out the chaff from the wheat, so to speak, and try and concentrate on the core business, which is really forms of educating to conventional forms of educating. And this community of people are in the business of open educational practice, as I said, which comprises open learning, open access, open source, open scholarship, and all of those sorts of things. And I think that's our core business, and I think that's where we should be. And so I'll leave it at that point, Kurt. Thanks.
Very nicely stated. And Sheila, I have to meet you for dinner in about 10 minutes downstairs. So you're in another room somewhere in this hotel, and we maybe lost Sheila there as I'm talking. She'll pop back in. Maybe she'll reconnect here in a second. There's Sheila. Sheila, would you like to give us a 1 minute, minute and a half closing statement here on what you've heard tonight? You have to unmute. I can unmute you if you. There you go. You're unmuted. Go ahead.
Yeah, it's been a very enriching experience for me. Hearing from all of you, the lessons learned of what works, what doesn't, what can be improved. Just a couple of points from my end. I think we should continue to share these lessons in a periodic way basis, so that we all can leverage what all of you are experiencing on the ground. Because what I notice from my own world, I'm dealing with policymakers, but then you have some rich experience with a much larger spectrum of learners. The other thing I'd like to reflect on is, yes, Shom just mentioned that ultimately it is about learning and how to improve the knowledge gains, and in many cases in development, how do you use learning to mitigate some of the complex development challenges. And so I think we need to do some more research and get more evidence on how MOOCs are helping us achieve that. Right now, there is the whole argument about dropout rates, and of course there are counter arguments that people come in, it's like a buffet, you come in, you consume what you want and so on. But ultimately, the advantage of MOOCs is going to be how effectively people learn and how effectively they're able to apply what they learn to their jobs. So we need more evidence on that. And the third point I'd like to make is that there are lots of MOOCs that don't focus on the quality aspect, and I'd like to see much more templates and models emerging on what makes a high impact, high quality MOOC, and how can we scale that up. So these would be some thoughts that I'd like to leave with, that have largely been built upon everything I've heard this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Sheila. Maybe you'll include that in your talk tomorrow, in your keynote here tomorrow. Sure. Sanjay has rejoined us. I saw him briefly. Now he's gone again. I was going to let him. Sanjay, are you there? Or did we lose you again? Okay, well, since Sanjay is not here, I'll just say thank you all for coming tonight. I'm going to close this session in about 30 seconds or so. Would you like to make a comment here about what you saw?
Literally all over the world, and also from a diversity of different perspectives, and I really appreciate it. And I hope this is a starting point rather than the closing. So I hope this is an exciting point for us to start more collaborations together. And I also wanted to encourage people to reach out to this group of people, and we will definitely want to stay in touch. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, thank you all. And people in Toronto, Melinda and Sam, enjoy your conference in Toronto. People back in Bloomington and in Austin, Texas, in Champaign, Urbana, and in other locales around the world that we've had here tonight. It's been unique to use Zoom to connect to so many different places. I think we had 26 people in here. We probably had at least 10 different countries represented in those 26 people here tonight. So thanks again, and thanks for coming. And Jing, yes, and Mel, thanks for your little comments there. Thank you all for the panelists from Tampines early in the morning in Thailand, and very early in the morning in Kenya for Itiano, early for Jing in Beijing, and a little later at night for Sam and Melinda. Get your beauty sleep. Don't go to, I won't get my beauty sleep, but you guys should get to bed soon. I'm gonna hang out and have some dinner. It's 3 hours earlier here, or later as your perspective there. Raj, thanks for coming, and everyone else. Hannah, you were the first one in. If you get the file, let me know. I will see you too, Hannah. We're meeting down below at the 7:30 for dinner if you want to join us. Okay, good night, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you. Maybe we'll get a book out of this. I'll steal all your ideas. That's just the way it is. And Tiano, tell us how we can revote. I want to revote. Good night, everybody.
I'll let you know once we get it right.
Bye, everybody.